So it is Tuesday, June 16th, 2015. We're in the backyard of Twin Cities Leather and Latte on the patio with Carl Gscheidmeier and Colin Spriestersbach.
I'm Carl Gscheidmeier.
I'm Colin Spriestersbach.
And we are talking today about the original giant leather pride and rainbow flags, because these are the two gentlemen who are responsible for them. Responsible for the original ones and responsible by extension for the fact that we still have them in the parade. So I want to find out, how did they come about? Where did the original idea for the flags come from? Let's start with that.
I don't know exactly when it started, but it started over drinks. What had happened the previous year of Pride, they had been in the hole substantial amounts of money, and we were in danger that there was no seed money for Pride. So I told Ashley that my other half and I would fund the parade and we'd rebuild from there if we had to. That said, I got my little horse in a patoot and decided, well, being a part of the leather community, I wanted to go first for a change. So I cooked up the idea of a leather float, having a leather winners of all the titles be on it, and featuring the leather clubs for a change. And in the process of telling about it, Carl came up with the idea of, well, are you going to do a flag or what? And I said, well, yeah, I was thinking of a flag, 6 colors and, 30 by 40, 50, whatever. She said, well, why don't we do it curb to curb? And I went, what?
Well, it was kind of funny. We were just sitting there having our lattes, one right after the other. And he said that he would like a flag, but we need someone strong enough to carry it in case of a huge wind would come along.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
And he was under the assumption that we'd have a flag being carried normally on a pole. And I kept thinking, what if a strong wind would come, even the strongest person? We thought of Adam, who used to be bouncer at the 90s, would carry it. And then I thought, no, instead of going vertical, let's go horizontal. And he liked that idea. Then all of a sudden, all these lights and that went in, bursting in my head, and I says, Colin, what do you think of this? New York has always been the place to come up with stuff. Let's have Minneapolis be the place for a change. And of course, Colin, knowing that he likes to do things subtle, I said, let's do it grand. Let's do it curb to curb and a block long. And his face just was so astonished with that idea, I knew I sold him.
Well, then the construction started, which ended up in his hands. First off, he had to find all the materials. He told me what, he needed. I said, well, you got a blank check for me. We'll just get the materials and, are you going to sew it? And he said, yep, I can do it in my basement.
Now, we were only thinking of the rainbow flag.
Until I opened my own.
Until we started brainstorming a little bit more, and I liked his idea. Well, I'll go along with making the leather flag also. And he liked that idea. I says, we'll make that one curb to curb and a block long. Okay, he fell in love with the idea. And of course, it was grand. The very first time they ever were opened up was on the parade route at the very beginning. I had them all folded just properly. I never even saw them opened up in my basement because the basement wasn't big enough.
Well, we opened them up on Victor Drive.
Oh yes,
And
that's right.
so that we could fold them properly to get them so that they'd open on the street, and fold it up so that we could get them in a car. And so he came with the car. I was organizing the parade. And for the first time, I had gotten the Dykes on Bikes to really help us and be very compliant and saying, oh, we'll go second. And I went, what? It said, you need to go first this time. Well, great. And so I was busy getting the parade ready to start. Flags haven't opened up yet, but everybody's starting to rev engines, getting ready. And he opened the flags up, and well, I kind of lost it because I didn't think they were that big, and so did everybody carrying them. They were flabbergasted because it took 100 people to carry each
the person, okay, you're going to be on this side of the block, you're going to be on this side of the block. These two tags here are the end of the flag. So when I say go, you head toward the corner there, you head toward that corner, and don't look back until you are totally open with the flag, and just keep on running. And they ran and they ran. I was in the very front of the, I think it was the yellow portion of the rainbow flag. And I started running, and I'm looking back, watching this thing getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's already a half a block long, and it's still not opened up all the way. And I saw Colin on the side there, and he's just going, you know, I thought he was going to blow a gasket. You know, he was so happy with the final results.
Yeah, I was. Having started the parade, my duty was to go to the turn where it goes off of Hennepin Avenue onto towards the park. Well, I go down and I stop along the way, and they said, well, you know, what's new about this year at the reviewing stand? And I said, you'll see, it's coming. And they said, well, what? I said, the surprise will be worth it. So I get down to the turn. As they're coming down, the flags are being dragged on the ground because the crowd, and I saw money being thrown into them from both sides. We had never counted on that at all. And that first year it was like $8,000 that were thrown in. And the next year it was even more. And it started, we had to figure out some way to get under those flags so that to hold them. So we came up with the idea of a carol. And then barrels on the side with hoops. And unfortunately then Ashley died. And other people took over the parade that year because I hadn't been called. I was wondering what was going on. And flags did go down the street that year. Not as we had planned, but they did go down. And I was pleased as punch. And when they replaced them a few years later, I was very happy that they felt worthy enough that they wanted to keep that permanently as a feature of the parade.
Okay, Carl, how did it happen that you became the person to sew them?
Well, I guess mainly because I was
The
doing
drag queen.
I was just doing a lot of sewing for the shows that I was producing with Shaney and Flo. We were, at the time, we were working at the Brass Rail doing the shows, and in between making new wardrobe every week for that, still had to help do wardrobe for the regular show, because the three of us, we always did productions and had matching wardrobes, and we changed every 30 seconds, top to bottom, so we had to have something new. So he knew I knew how to sew, and he asked me.
Okay. How did you arrive at the size of the flags? I know you said as wide as the street and the block long, but did you actually go out and measure Hennepin Avenue?
No. After we got over that euphoria, I said, well, what can we do? And he got out his calculator. He said, well, a bolt is this wide and it's this long. So, well, 6 of them go curb to curb.
Okay.
So we'll take it out a full bolt length. Unfortunately, it wasn't a full block long because the bolt is what, 80 yards?
I think it was 87 yards.
Yeah.
And of course, by the time it got sewn together, of course, that brings in the material a little bit, but it still was big.
Yeah. Did you make a pattern for the flag, or you just started going?
I usually don't use patterns. I can picture it up here, and I know how it would turn out. Unfortunately, I had to take 2 of the colors totally apart because I sewed them upside down. And I'm sure people wouldn't notice it, but those people who do know how to sew, they know that the fabric, if you show it one way, has lines going this way. Otherwise it goes this way. So I had to seam rip every single stitch all the way down on both sides, re-sew it, flip it over, then sew it again to get the final stitch in for holding.
And then the mechanical securing was my job to get the handholds built.
Okay.
And come up with a way to do it. Well, what really set me to crying was when the leather flug turned the corner and all the titles bowed, took a knee, and then dipped head, and it was like, oh, I didn't expect that at all.
Yeah.
You know? Now I'm really embarrassed.
I know there were other large rainbow flags at the time, but as far as you know, was this the largest leather flag that had ever been created up to that time?
It was the largest set of matching flags.
Okay.
That they were the same dimension and same length, and that was our pride, that it was the first match set. Now they've been eclipsed by New York and LA and San Francisco, but we were the first ones to do it that big.
Do they have large leather flags too?
New York does. I'm not sure about the other communities.
Okay. But we were the first.
Yeah.
Okay. Where did the fabric come from, and what type of fabric was it?
It had to be sturdy, but it had to be light. And we went to Michael's, and they had a very nice array of colors, and you just can't get a red because a red does not always come out red when it's in the sunlight. It could turn orange. So we had to make sure it was going to stay red. It had to be waterproofed to make sure that it
and color fast.
Yes, so nothing would run. And so we got a really good price from them because we told them what we were designing, and they helped us out choosing the fabric for us.
Okay. What kind of a sewing machine did you use, and what kind of thread?
Believe it or not,
This is going to be news for me.
believe it or not, it ended up to be a Singer sewing machine, the regular home model that Mom and Pop always used with a front and back and a zigzag. That's all it had, and that's all I needed. I had a serger that was borrowed to me, and I started to use it, and it just ate up the material, and I stopped immediately. I says, I'm not even going to chance it. So I went back to my good old-fashioned sewing machine and used that. The thread was a little bit heavier nylon that could withstand tugging and wetness, especially if it did rain. We wanted to make sure that they wouldn't just unravel and disintegrate.
And did you hammer in the grommets, or did you do that?
We both did.
Both
We
did.
did a Victory Drive. We started putting in the grommets. first time I ever did that one. And then we fitted in all the handholds that I made. Little did I suspect that it was going to become so heavy, otherwise I would have put padding in for the hands. But was it that year or the next year that we flew 5 people with the leather flag? Wind came up and took the back end of the flag up into the air, about 20 feet, and the look on these people's faces was too sight to behold.
They went up.
Yeah, way up.
Okay, talk about the process of sewing it. Where did you sew it, first of all?
Well, I was living in an apartment building, an 8-unit apartment building, and I took over the basement. And the basement was, not large at all, because there were cupboards on both sides, and I just had enough. I had a ping pong table, and that's what I used in the center of the room, the 2 ping pong table sections. And then I was at one end, and the material came over my head and up from the bottom and into the machine, and then across the tables, and then as it got to the end, then it was folded so I could take it back and put the final stitch in. Then it was all back on this side. So then I had to move everything over, get the next color, put that over, sew that, and do the same thing over and
You was
over.
buried in fabric, quite literally. Dan helped you a little bit on
Dan
that.
helped me a couple times, which I can really thank him. He has a really good mind for figures. When it came time to making the leather flag, we knew approximately how big the flags were by that time. And so he figured out the precise angle and the size of the red heart. I wanted everything to be just right, not a small heart, not too large of one, because we had pictures of the leather flag, and we saw that it had to touch part of the white, had to go up to a certain section here, had to only cover so many lines of fabric here. So then he took that all into consideration, and I gotta thank that man. He could figure that out 1, 2, 3.
Dan McGough, my husband now.
Yes.
You said 100 people carried each flag?
Yeah.
So do you remember how many grommets and holes and handles there were?
Let's see, it was 8 on each end, 16, and then take that from 100. So there's 84, so 42 people on each side.
Okay.
And not all of them had handles to hold, because at the time we just had enough to get in. So it was like one person had a handle, the one behind them and in front of them just could hold on to the edges.
Yeah.
That fabric, yeah.
Okay. So you've already talked a little bit about the first time you saw the flag in the parade. I mean, you talked about you. What did you think?
Well, my mouth hung open and I teared up because I knew they were big, but having them open in the parade for the first time and watching other people just staring at them, I felt a little bit of pride that I had something to do with it, but I felt so good because I watched Ashley's face and she was just like this, as one for Ashley. She was flabbergasted. She came over and hugged me for them. And because at that point we weren't sure, it was our game to start building Pride again from that point. Pride did mount that year, luckily they found the money. Dan and I helped out a bit on that. But we wanted to make sure that we had something to build from, and I wanted to protect Ashley at all costs because I was very loyal to Ashley.
I wanted to mention that when the flags were opening up, he like he stated, he was so excited. But to see the community just in awe, seeing these mammoth flags getting bigger and bigger, it was so worth doing something for the community.
Yeah.
You couldn't get paid for it. It was just so heartwarming to see the smiles on their faces and the applause and the yelling and screaming. It was well worth it.
And when the Dice and Bikes came, they were going, yeah, we should have been second. Yeah, we should have been second.
How long did it take you to sew the flags?
It took approximately 3.5 months to do it, and that's 7 days a week, at least putting in 4 hours on some days. Otherwise, it was 12, 16 hours on the weekends when I had the time to do it. I didn't do anything else but do the show, went to work, came home, started sewing.
And how far in advance of the parade did you get them done? I mean, did you?
They were done 3 weeks before the parade, but there was the final things that had to be put on, like doing the grommets and final trim work along it, because I'm a stickler. It has to look finished.
We were doing some repairs even when the flags were on the street. We found we had missed a few things.
Okay.
And as we had the flags on the street from my car, we were trying to get all the handholds in because we hadn't put those on ahead of time.
They were still being made.
Yeah.
And all of the money that was flown on the flags, where did that go? Did that go to Pride?
No, it went to different charities. It went to Children with AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
It went to the Liveness Project. It went to MAP. It went to other.
Every penny count.
Every penny count. That's it.
And just before the parade started, when they says, okay, the Dykes on Bikes were already started the parade. Just before that, I says to Mike DeLorean, I says, do you have a magic marker? He says, yes. I says, give it to me. These flags will now become alive. I signed my name and dated each flag just before they went out onto the streets.
That was before we started the parade. You did that.
Yeah, just before.
Okay. That's my list of questions. Any other reminiscences either of you have, or anything else you want to say?
Oh, we could reminisce here forever about everything, but no, I think that probably covers it for the parade. Yeah.
Anything for you, Carl?
Just that Colin has such a wonderful imagination. He can see things.